You could be wiser as an educated advisor. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, understanding legal claims against financial advisors and insurance agents. Part 1 in our series on best practices for financial professionals with attorney Ilya Lerma. All here on Let's Get Down to Business. Welcome to the show, Ilya.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. And I wanted to say just the last time when I first met you, you know, you're kind of hard on us. I thought you're tough on us, but you know, it's only for our own good. Our show then went to CNN, if you remember, and they did a little article. Some guy did an article on us for CNN. So welcome back, and maybe we can give some fresh fodder and get on CNN again.
Let's see about that.
Let's talk about, you know, understanding legal claims against financial professionals. Some are security and financial advisors, some are insurance agents. I want to talk a little bit about this because in our area, we are all exposed to liability, litigation, arbitration, especially for us who carry E&O. These things really matter. Talk me through, what are the type of professions that are exposed to this? Because I can't believe it's just us.
Well, absolutely not. And let me be clear on the outset that I am not a securities attorney. I don't handle claims for securities violations. But over the near 20-year history that I've had as an attorney, I have handled a whole host of claims against licensed professionals. That includes everyone from insurance producers to real estate brokers to licensed physicians. And what I've learned is that when you hold yourself out in a professional role, the duties, while they may vary in terms of how you carry those things out, they don't really vary in terms of how a jury may see them. So really you're talking about people who are licensed, they are educated, they possess special skills and expertise, and hold themselves out as such, as possessing that kind of information.
Let me ask you this, if I'm out on LinkedIn and my bio's out there for all to see, and I'm holding myself out as a retirement expert or maybe a securities asset allocation manager, is there now more onus on me because I'm PRing that I'm an expert?
Absolutely, there is. Absolutely. And a good attorney is going to be researching your bio on LinkedIn. They're going to be getting copies of your business cards. They're going to be looking at the initials that you have on your letterhead. And if you hold yourself out as part of the $1 million circle, if you hold yourself out as someone who has particularized expertise, absolutely. Because what you're doing is you're holding yourself out to the public in that manner, and they are looking to you and bringing you business in that capacity.
Is there any judicious way to be able to promote my practice online without exposing myself and using high-end adjectives like I am an expert or I'm an aficionado in this area of the code?
The proof is in the pudding. You have to be Muhammad Ali. So that means if you're going to make those statements, you have to be prepared to back them up with real results, with real clients, and with real advice that isn't going to be seen as negligent by the community of your peers.
Well, now I've heard you use this. I remember this from our last time we were together, and it's a kind of a, it sounds like a very legal term to me, but it's evidentiary standard. You know, what is that?
Well, in your industry, things have evolved a little bit in terms of how financial advisors are being looked at as fiduciaries. In certain industries, such as insurance, different states apply different standards of review. And so when you are a fiduciary, you have a higher standard of honesty and disclosure than you might have under a suitability standard, which is a term that would be familiar in your industry.
I was looking at the BICE regs, which is the suitability standard's a lot lower than the fiduciary, and of course the Department of Labor now is arguing about this very thing. Maybe with President Trump, we were not going to see the fallout that I thought we were going to see from it, but nevertheless, that doesn't really check you at the door for arbitration or going to court.
Absolutely, it doesn't.
Well, let's talk about it. You know, I always look at this word intent and negligence, right? Most of the people I know that have gotten in trouble, I don't know them all, but I know some of them, they didn't seem to be doing something dastardly. You know, they made a mistake here. It doesn't seem like it was an intent to injure, but it brought harm. It still brought harm.
Right.
Talk to me about the differences.
So when you're dealing with intentional harms, you're talking about scienter, you're talking about state of mind, an intentional or a willful intent to deceive someone. And you're correct that those are different kinds of claims. Those typically involve criminal penalties, and not the civil penalties that we look for. As civil attorneys, we tend to deal in arenas where there's more negligence, where it's absent-minded. It may be poor training on the part of your staff. It may be poor communication that you have with your client. It may be a failure to document important historical events that would keep you out of that negligence, that the professional is required to meet a reasonableness standard. Would a reasonable financial producer in this situation have done the same type of thing? And that reasonableness standard really varies. I mean, it's not a bright line test in terms of what you can say was reasonable. But if you're cutting it very close to the line with some negligent practices, you're letting staff handle phone calls that perhaps you should be handling, you're not following up with your clients the way you've kind of held yourself out, you're not being the expert, you're not following up on your training, that's when really those negligence claims can surface and bite the producer. Okay,
so I'm not using, if I'm hearing you right, and this is the whole reason why we're doing this series, best practices is a big issue. And one issue that we talked about just earlier was that seems like fraud. You knew what you were doing, you were intent to injure, you benefited from it from a financial point of view. But on this other area we're talking about was a little more, are you really as professional as you say you are? Because if you were, there's kind of a reasonable standard. In our industry, again, we have BICE, and now we have the fiduciary rule, which whether it'll get passed or not, I don't know, but we're called to it. And you know, to me, we're supposed to be professional, so I'm all over that, and I'm okay with that. What happens, though, when we cross the line and we actually breach the fiduciary obligation? I mean, when you're going to arbitration, hopefully you aren't going to court. You know, maybe you can talk this out before we get that far. But what is that breach? What does it look like?
Well, a breach means you're not carrying out the promises and the representations that you made. A breach can occur in an obligation to purchase a particular product at a particular time and that wasn't completed. A breach could be negligent advice. One of the claims that I think is beginning to grow in your industry are claims for negligent misrepresentation. You're representing to your client that the product is going to do something or it's going to achieve some type of result. And you either aren't educated or sophisticated enough to see consequences down the line, or you haven't conveyed those properly. And so even in just the conveyance of information, if you're doing that negligently, it can subject you to liability.
Now I notice there's mistakes you make. That could be errors. But now this issue of omission, right? I left material fact out of a statement. I left something that if it was disclosed, may have changed the purchase, may have changed the plan itself. So talk to me a little about errors, but omissions especially.
Absolutely. There is clearly a difference. The errors being you've checked the wrong box, you've indicated the wrong amount, you have mathematical errors. Those types of errors are, fall under the errors portion of your coverage. But omission is leaving out material facts, just as you described. That disclosure under your fiduciary obligations, are you leaving out the fact that there are bonuses or incentives, financial fees that you were paid by recommending certain types of products? And if you're not disclosing that information and the client has an adverse result, if you didn't disclose it, and more important, if you didn't disclose it in writing or have some way of documenting that you disclosed it, then you can be subject to liability. And if you had done the reverse, if you had actually documented it and conveyed that information, then there's no liability on the part of the producer.
Okay, so I'm thinking, hey, if I'm somehow being compensated not the usual way. If I look at a prospectus, it shows the expense load. I'm charging him through my RRA, there's my fee. But there might be other sweet honey relationships. I like the fund manager. They take us out to dinner. Oh, they took us to Hawaii. Those are things that need to be disclosed that I'm actually benefiting beyond our relationship that's in our engagement letter.
Exactly. And the reason you have to disclose it is because it puts your client at a disadvantage. You are privy to information that they do not otherwise have. You may not be recommending a whole host of other products or other companies that may be equally or better suited for your client because you have this adverse interest that lines your pockets. And that's exactly the way a good attorney is going to paint that if you end up in court.
Okay, so if I have consumers watching this show, they have every right to ask about this.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and bring it to the table. Are you being compensated in any other way that's being not disclosed?
Yes, absolutely. And they should. It's important for your clients and you to be honest and have candor, because one of the ways that the fiduciary relationship breaks down in a lot of settings is through lack of communication and lack of candor. And when problems arise and you haven't been candid early on, it's very, very difficult for a client who feels that they've been misled to go back and trust you at that point that you do, in fact, have their best interests put first.
Well, don't forget to watch our next segment, Protecting Your Practice, part 2 of our series on best practices for financial professionals. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, and compliance officer. And don't forget to subscribe to my consumer show, Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. Daily content you can post on your website, social media accounts, and database distribution. I'm Steve Savant. Thanks for watching.